Okay, so in this video, I'm going to pick up where I left off, and I'm going to show you how to make a temporary crown that is going to be ready to be cemented on this abutment and inserted in the patient's mouth at time of surgery, or in time of recovery, or however you want to look at it. So the first thing we're going to do is we want to kind of sculpt this tooth, get it to the right shape that we want it to look like. Okay, and so there's a number of different tools we're going to use here. I'm not going to mess with the incisal anatomy and whatnot too much. You can use all the tools I'm going to show you, but mostly I'm just going to make this adaptable at the margin. Now, to do so, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the sculpt tools under brushes, and I'm going to use the drag tool. Okay, now I am going to make this tool fairly large at around 40. The strength, however you want, that's just about how sensitive it is. And the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to adjust from the appearance side to make sure that the gingival zenith is about the same height if I can. Just going to drag this up a little bit. You can always, and if you do something you don't like, you can always just undo. And then one more tool to do this is the robust smooth. Okay, so we're getting pretty close. Let's turn off the tooth for a second and look at the model, and you can see that I'm never going to be able to get it just right based on, if I click on this magnet tool, I can sort of see through it. You know, based on the tissue, I'm not going to get it just perfect, but I think that's pretty darn good at this point. And so now I'm okay with the external anatomy. Let's work on the margin side of things. So I'm going to turn off the model. The model is no longer relevant. I'm also going to duplicate this tooth, because anything I do here, I want to be able to get back to this point in case I don't like something I do. Okay, so I'm selected this copy. This is the one I'm going to adjust. And I know if I click on the magnet of the abutment, I can see where it is. Okay, so I can now take my sculpt tools, make sure I'm selecting the tooth first. If I take the, okay, I'm going to go to sculpt. I'm going to once again grab the drag tool, and I'll keeping it at the 40. I don't want to go above the margin of the abutment. I'm going to go just slightly below it. And I'm going to grab from the outside, and I'm just going to kind of scooch around. This doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to do a few different things to get this where we want it. Some sides need to be scooched in a little more than others. And like I said, just depending on where it is within the, where the implant lies within the tooth. It's usually going to be fairly lingual, hopefully, you know, so that we can get that screw access hole coming through the cingulum area, but not always possible. Okay. So now I have done that. The next thing I am going to do is I am going to actually jump into a different tool we have, which is the attract tool, which is going to put this magnet to use. I'm going to dial this back down to around 30 in size. Okay. And I'm going to come right around along the margin, just below it. Okay. And you can see, if I zoom in here, it is cinching right up against the margin. Again, stay at or just below the margin. I'm not trying to suck this up against the chimney of the tooth. And there we go. Last thing I want to do one more thing. I'm going to come up to brushes, and I'm going to come to the robust smooth, because now we're going to smooth this so it's not so abrupt. You could just stop here and skip forward a little bit in the video, and then just smooth this back with a handpiece. That would be perfectly fine. But I'm going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time just smoothing this just a touch, so I have a little less work to do with my handpiece. I will say that the strength I have this on right now is a bit much, perhaps, but in fact, I'm going to turn off the magnet so I can see the abutment a little better, and that looks pretty good. Yeah, looks good. Okay, and I am going to do one last thing. I don't always, this time I probably don't need to, but just for a default, what I would suggest is that you go back and do the magnet one more time just to truly make sure that it cinches up. To do that, you do have to select, you have to go to abutment and turn that magnet back on. Reselect the tooth, go to the sculpt, brushes, and attract. So I'm just doing it after I've smoothed it. Sometimes it's not as close as it needs to be, so I'm just running back over it right quick. Again, staying down below it. Okay, so there we are. I'm going to turn off the magnet so we can see our work. Looks pretty good. You can see that it's, and it's kind of hash marked around here. That means because it's totally lined up. Tooth is now sculpted pretty well the way I want it to be. And so now we are going to modify the abutment itself. Okay, so let's just turn off the tooth. And what the heck, let's go ahead and duplicate the abutment just in case we do something we don't like. The first thing we want to do is delete the inside of it. Okay, now if you want to print an entire abutment and crown all in one and print the whole thing, don't do this. But I don't suggest that. Or I guess you could, you would just, you just use the duplicate later on. But I don't suggest that because this area down here, this has to be extremely intimate and well manufactured to fit precisely, and I just don't trust it. So I do not recommend that. You'll see what I'm planning instead. So we're gonna go ahead and delete the inside. How I'm gonna do that? I'm gonna hit select. I'm gonna make my select tool very large. So it's like it's selecting the entire thing. However, I'm going to come down here to the crease angle thickness, threshold, sorry. And I'm going to make it pretty high, around in the 50s or so. And if you watch what happens is, I'm going to click right here, and it just highlighted everything that was nice and smooth transition. Let me go ahead and, oh yeah, if you look along the border, the transition from here to this rim is greater than a 50, or is less than a 58-degree transition. Therefore, it won't allow me to, it won't select that. So I can go ahead and hit delete. That's gone. Do that the same thing right here. Just click once, delete. Now there's some stuff remaining on the inside. No big deal. I can just double click the whole outside. It will only select what's continuous, meaning on the inside here, these are not attached, so they're not selected. If I press the I button, or it's invert, I think it must be in here, or is it in modify? Invert. Now just the inside stuff is selected. Just hit delete. I'm going to change the size of my selection down because it tends to make the software run slowly. And now if I just hit escape, you can see I've just got an outside area, the outside of the abutment. Now it's not a closed model. I need to close it. So I'm going to come into Analyze, and I'm going to, as I say, heal the ends. It's super simple for the software to do this because it's a very even transition. Okay? Now I'm going to do something to the top of it. I'm going to have a screw hole so I can get access to this. This is a pretty simple thing to do. I'm going to hit select again, and I'm going to make this size smaller than the inside, but not too big. This is probably fine right here. Notice that it didn't even get everything I selected because of that whole crease angle idea. Now I can hit the T button or transform, which is under deform, and just drag this way down. You could also use the extrude. There's different tools to do the same thing, but this works just fine. Okay, so if you turn on the tooth to get an idea, here's the screw hole. That's what it's going to look like. Okay, so let's turn that tooth back off. We have now created the screw hole. The last thing we need to do is we need to create an offset. We need this to slide on. We can't make the hole the exact same size. So I'm going to double click, and everything that's gray is going to get selected. It doesn't select anything else, only what's continuous and the same color, same surface group. I'm going to come into Edit, select, double click. Now go to Edit, and I'm going to hit Extrude, which is the D button. This is something you might have to play around with, okay? I guess I did extrude part of that. That's interesting. It doesn't usually do that, but that doesn't matter. I am going to change this to 0.1. You might go down to 0.05, but this is 100 microns. And a 100 micron gap when you're trying to adhere a crown to an abutment, that's pretty typical. So I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to go to normal. And so what it's doing is it's extruding everything by that amount, okay? By 0.1 millimeter. Leave the offset as offset, not flat. And I'm going to hit OK. So if you look, if you want, I'm going to hit escape. And if I click on this, turn it off, I can see what I have created here. Okay? You can see the gap everywhere. So I've just created a passive offset. Let's turn that back on. And the last thing we need to do is turn our tooth back on. And you can also see that it's bigger, which is good. That's going to help us. If you don't do it in this order, it's not going to work out well. You need to do the abutment after you've done the modification of the tooth. So I'm going to click on the tooth, hold my control button on my keyboard, click on the abutment. Now, once again, because I'm picky, I'm going to duplicate these two. That way I can always, if I don't like what I get, I'm not in trouble. So tooth, control, abutment. Click on Boolean difference. Okay, I'm just going to say accept. It's going to do a little calculation. Now, I don't need this thing down here, so I can just hit select, draw a big, loop around it, hit delete, and here is my screw retained crown ready to go. One last thing I also need to do is I need to get my contacts dialed in. Okay? To do that, I'm going to turn on my maxilla. And for this, I only need to remove the proximal contacts, okay? Because everything below that, it's supposed to stick through the gingiva. So all I want to do is extract that part. So to do so, I am going to first duplicate it, so I can always go back to this if I want, turn that off. And on this one, I am going to hit select, here, here, and the contacts are still fully visible. Nothing's deleted there. Hit delete. Okay. So now I'm just going to hit escape here, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to subtract. I'm going to select, control maxilla, and then I'm going to hit Boolean difference. There we are. The proximal contacts have been removed. Hit accept. This whole thing out here I can get rid of by simply selecting it, double clicking it, delete. So now there you have it. I've got my screw retained implant crown ready to go. Let me see where I'm at in this video. I am at 13 minutes. Obviously I'm explaining this, and if you were making this with a software, you're gonna have to do a lot of design process anyways. So realistically, I don't think we've spent much more time than I would have on, say, Cerac or some other software. Okay, so this can now be 3D printed, milled, I guess, if you have a third-party mill that can just mill STLs. But realistically, this isn't designed to be a final restoration. I didn't even spend time. I mean, this part right here, honestly, is irritating me that I didn't smooth that out. Who cares for this? We'll just print it out, edge down, incisal edge towards the build platform, and remove the supports, polish it up, and cement it on a tie base using just whatever composite or resin cement, and it's just a temp. And you can take it a step further to make it a final, but honestly, for me, this should be a good to go temp, ready to go for surgery. And I'm walking you through this whole process. It should be about a 5 to 10 minute process to design this, and that way you don't have to hand make it during the day of surgery. So anyway, hope this helps, and stay tuned for the next video if you want to see another way to do it.